What if the most profound changes in life didn't come from a grand sudden shift, but from the quiet, consistent hum of everyday choices? For years, Mark knew only the rhythm of the mundane. Each morning, the same tired alarm, the same lukewarm coffee, the same commute past identical houses, his office, a cubicle bathed in the insistent drone of fluorescent lights, offered little more than a windowless view and an endless stream of digital tasks. He wasn't struggling for survival, not exactly, but the feeling of being perpetually stuck, treading water in a sea of bills and unfulfilled aspirations, was a weight that pressed down on him every single day. He yearned for something more, a deeper current that could pull him towards a life with genuine purpose and less worry. The truth was, Mark was caught in a cycle many understood intimately: the predictable grind. He worked hard, put in his hours, but the numbers in his bank account never seemed to climb, only fluctuate. The monthly rent, the car payment, the student loans, they were relentless tides, pulling him back just as he thought he might make headway. He'd seen the success stories on screens, read the headlines about innovators and titans, but their lives felt impossibly distant, built on a foundation he couldn't even begin to imagine. He felt a quiet desperation, a craving for a path that genuinely led somewhere different, somewhere better. One evening, scrolling aimlessly, a short documentary clip caught his eye. It wasn't about a tech visionary or a Silicon Valley disruptor. It was about an investor, a man named Warren Buffett, known not for flash, but for patience. The clip highlighted a simple, almost unremarkable detail. Buffett spent hours each day, quietly, just reading. No grand gestures, no complex algorithms, just an unwavering dedication to understanding. It was a small spark, but it landed in a place where a deeper fire was waiting to be lit. Mark's journey began not with a bang, but with a whimper. The frustration peaked on a particularly bleak Tuesday evening. A notice arrived from the bank, an overdraft fee. It wasn't a large sum, but it felt like a mocking punch, a final confirmation of his seemingly endless financial dance. He remembered the feeling of that paper in his hand, crinkling slightly as his grip tightened. The sting wasn't just about the money, it was about the recurring pattern, the constant anxiety that whispered in the back of his mind. He looked around his small apartment, the dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows. He felt adrift, utterly alone in his struggle, and the hum of the city outside seemed to mock his stagnant existence. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that something had to change, or he would remain caught in this cycle forever. That night, the memory of the documentary clip resurfaced. The idea of consistent, quiet dedication. It wasn't about finding a secret formula, it was about building a foundation, piece by painstaking piece. He thought of Buffett, not as a mythical figure, but as someone who consistently sought understanding. Mark started small, almost imperceptibly. He began by setting aside 30 minutes each evening, not for entertainment, but for reading. He didn't jump into complex financial texts immediately. Instead, he started with biographies, stories of people who had built something from nothing, or narratives that explored human behavior and decision-making. He read about Andrew Carnegie's early industrial ventures, absorbing how he meticulously understood every facet of his businesses, or the quiet discipline that underpinned Elon Musk's relentless drive. The pages became a quiet sanctuary, a space where he could absorb knowledge without judgment, simply observing how others approached challenges and opportunities. He found himself pausing, rereading sentences, letting the ideas sink in. This wasn't about getting rich quick. It was about truly comprehending how the world worked, how value was created, and how persistent effort compounded over time. The core idea was simple. Learning wasn't a luxury. It was the bedrock of progress. And consistency in that learning was the key. Repeated it to himself. Consistency, consistency, consistency. The turning point wasn't a dramatic epiphany, but a subtle shift in perspective that led to a practical action. One afternoon, while engrossed in an old book about market cycles, a specific passage about understanding undervalued assets resonated deeply. It wasn't a direct investment tip, but a philosophy. Look for what others ignore, understand its true worth, and have the patience to let it grow. Mark began to look at his own skills differently. His job involved data analysis, a task he often found tedious. But what if he applied this undervalued asset philosophy to his own capabilities? He realized that while his company didn't fully leverage his analytical mind, local small businesses might. He started spending his lunch breaks researching local businesses, looking for those that seemed to be struggling with their own data or online presence. He wasn't looking for a handout or a quick buck, but a chance to apply his growing knowledge. One afternoon, he stumbled upon a small, struggling bakery, a place he often walked past, known for its warm, comforting scent. He noticed their online presence was almost non-existent, saw an undervalued asset. After a few days of internal debate, he drafted a simple proposal, not formal or flashy, but genuine. He offered to help them with their online visibility, to analyze their sales data, not for a huge fee, but for a modest sum, just enough to cover his growing collection of books and a few practical tools. He met the owner, a kind woman with tired eyes, and nervously presented his idea. She listened, considered, and then, after a long pause, a small smile touched her lips. She agreed. It was a small, almost insignificant step to an outside observer, but for Mark, it was monumental. This small, independent venture became Mark's real-world classroom. He spent his evenings and weekends diving into the bakery's sales figures, analyzing customer patterns, and optimizing their rudimentary online presence. He applied the same meticulous, patient observation he'd learned from reading about great investors. Just as Warren Buffett spent hours each day immersing himself in annual reports and economic data, Mark immersed himself in spreadsheets and analytics for a local business. He didn't chase fads or quick trends. He focused on what was fundamental: understanding the customer, improving the product, and building trust. The results weren't instant, but they were steady. Within 6 months, the bakery's online orders had increased by nearly 30%, and local foot traffic had noticeably improved. Mark's small fee had grown into a consistent, albeit modest, income stream. His first real win wasn't a multi-million-dollar deal, but the quiet satisfaction of seeing a tangible, positive impact. It proved a fundamental truth: consistent, focused effort, born from deep understanding, could indeed shift reality. The transformation in Mark was profound, far beyond the modest financial gains. He no longer felt trapped, adrift in a sea of obligations. Instead, he felt a quiet confidence, an inner strength born from disciplined action. The hum of the fluorescent lights in his main job still existed, but they no longer defined his world. His evenings weren't filled with aimless scrolling, but with purposeful learning and the practical application of that knowledge. He continued his reading, expanding his understanding of different industries, human psychology, and the long arc of economic history. He realized that the power wasn't in some hidden secret, but in the relentless, consistent pursuit of understanding, coupled with the courage to act on it. The journey wasn't about becoming a different person, but about uncovering the potential that had always been within him, waiting to be unleashed through simple, consistent habits. This truth, understood by the titans of industry and observed in everyday lives, still shapes destinies today. The next step is closer than you think, often just a consistent choice away,